So I feel like something I end up talking about a lot is the power habit, right? Just this idea, not the book, the power habit, the idea of like the power of habits, right? This idea that like there is an immense power in holding a habit that you do every day. I think one of the most underrated things is doing something every day. Like I just think it's probably one of the like this like the closest thing that there's like a cheat code to life is just like being able to do something every single day. I think, though, that I've talked about this a lot in the self-development sense, whereas, like, one of the places it exists most of all in a way that I will say, in my opinion, borders on almost profound, is in art. Like, I think that there is a intensive power of habit in art that goes way far beyond just, the power of habit in something else. Usually, to start off here, I guess I should say, the whole sort of case for building a daily habit is constant improvement. If you have an hour to do something on maybe Sunday, let's say, and you can improve 3% in that hour of like a skill you have, let's say you're trying to learn an instrument maybe or something like that, that's great. But if you have 10 minutes a day and you're able to improve, let's say maybe, for argument's sake, 1% a day, that's way more. That's, the compound interest on that over time is going to be much bigger. I think this works in a sense that, from everything I know, is like almost scientific in a lot of fields, like cooking, riding a bike, working out, things like that. I think this works very much in this straightforward way that, like, I have said here, like 1% better each day, 365 times better a year. It's more than that, right? Because 1% on 1% on 1%. I don't know, guys. I'm painting for a reason. I'm not very good at math. If I could make some money at Lockheed Martin, I'd be doing it by now. Unfortunately, I cannot. That was a joke. I'd never do that. But with art, yes, that's true. If you draw every day, I do believe you'll get 1% better over time, and I think that compound interest argument still holds true. But I think there's almost an immeasurable number of what percent you'll actually get better. Because yes, you'll get better over time in, 1% on 1% on 1%, but I think if you draw every day, the difference is that you'll also be getting X% better 24/7. And this is why I think it is. This is why I think that is, right? I'm going to use writing as an example because I have the most experience with it, I'd say. I don't know. I think I've started writing before I did anything else. I don't know if it counts though, because I started writing stories with like my action figures as a kid. I guess that's not really writing, right? But I'm gonna use writing because I think it's a more direct example than anything else. And then I'll go through some other examples too, I'm sure though. When it comes to writing, right? You write every day, you get better. You can get better at the fundamentals, like grammar and things like that, and XYZ, right? But when you write every day, you will be seeing the world as a writer. It almost programs you to do so, right? Because if you know I'm going to be writing the next day, and that's in your mind, you're going to be thinking about things from that perspective. So I'm going to run through two camps. Person A is writing when he has an hour on Sundays. Person B is writing on the train ride home every single day. And let's say he gets like a 20 minutes to write. He's cramming it in, but he does it every single day, right? There's going to be a vast difference. On paper, yeah, these people are going to be practicing like around the same amount. I think maybe person B writing 20 minutes a day will, like, if they're really consistent, end up doing a little bit more, but these people will seemingly still be writing about an hour-ish a week. My math might not be right on that. Either way, let's say they're writing around the same amount. They're going to be getting the same amount of work done. They're both going to be writing. They're both going to be getting this novel they're working on done at the same rate. Let's say it's 100 pages, and they can really crack down on doing 2 pages a week. A year. It'll take them a year to write this novel, both of them, right? I would argue that person B's novel will still come out 1 billion times better because he's doing it every day versus person A who's only doing it once a week. Because what does the mindset of these two people look like? Person A is probably going to be leading a fairly normal life. Not to say that the life of a writer is like some profound thing, but he's just going to be leading his life, and then he's going to know, maybe Saturday night, he'll start thinking like, oh, I can't wait to write tomorrow. I'm excited. I get to work on this novel tomorrow. Something like that. Person B is going to be thinking about this writing all the time because he's going to be at work thinking, oh my God, I'm going to write it on the train ride home, thinking about it in the back of his mind. You know, it might not even be explicit. Oftentimes, I know for me, it's not explicit the way I think about these things. But the ideas will still come to him throughout the day. You know, let's say a woman walks in and she bursts into tears and then, you know, does something crazy. He'll be thinking about that like, oh man, like the emotion in that was interesting. I wonder if I could encapsulate that in this scene I'm working on. Maybe he'll see a man with an interesting hat and go, it's a perfect hat for one of my characters to write, or to wear, not write. The characters can't write, the writer does. You know, small little things like this really do matter, versus person B, or person A rather, who's writing on Sundays. Maybe on Sunday he'll be thinking, you know, he'll be on his walk, he'll see a tree that's nice, and he'll be like, oh, it's a tree like that, I can describe that, that'd be really nice, right? Maybe he'll get one or two things from his life that he can internalize into the writing. When somebody's writing every day though, and they can, you know, really internalize their surroundings and be like, wait, there's something I could add, there's something I could add, there's something I could add. I mean, I don't think you can keep track of how many things they'll be adding into their writing that are from their daily life. Their book will feel, by a unquantifiable metric, multiple times more real, like an insane amount more real than the other guys, because of just how much they're thinking about it in their daily life, how much they're infusing into it. That's a relatively direct way, but I think there's also a secondary way that's far less direct, but just as important. And that comes in identity, right? When you write once a week, you're a person who is currently writing a book, but for most of your week, you're an accountant, or whatever your job is. You're thinking about that. I think it's always interesting how, like, we introduce ourselves with the thing we do most. In my life, I introduce myself as a graphic designer still, just because that's my day job. That's what I tell people I am when I meet them for the first time. And I think that's what we all end up doing. We all identify ourselves by our jobs. Some people more, some people less, you know. Someday I'll, hopefully, if I can become good enough and maybe sell a painting or two, open that venue up to, I'm an artist, right? And that'd be awesome. But for the most part, we will still all be identifying ourselves by what we do in our lives. Because, I mean, how else would you? What would you say if you weren't saying your profession, or a profession that you're aspiring to take on? You know, you go from student to profession. That's, for the most part, how people identify themselves throughout their entire lives. But when you do something just as much, right, you also internalize that. If you are writing on Sundays, you are somebody who has the hobby of writing every Sunday, or maybe even a ritual or routine, whatever you want to call it. If you're somebody who's writing every day, you know, you become a writer and an accountant in your mind. And I think that has an element to it that is, once again, far more unquantifiable than the other one. The other example of like seeing things that you're going to put into your work, that becomes direct. But when you think you're a writer, right? When you genuinely are like, I am a writer, and you are walking around with that attitude, with that mindset, there is something about that you could never measure that affects the work so much more. And when you think you're a writer who's also seeing things 24/7 the way a writer sees them, the ideas will come to you in ways that it never could before if you weren't doing that every day. And that's why I paint every day. That's why I write every day. And that's why I'm a massive, massive believer in daily creation. More than probably anything else in my life. That's not true. That's not true. There's definitely more things. This is the painting. I really enjoy this. I think the deconstructedness of this looks genuinely so cool. I don't see any emotion in it though, and that I don't like. But I really like this painting. I really like how like the rib cage looks down here. I like the circle up there. You can see the egg of the torso there, and the balls of the shoulders. Man, I really like this painting. I wish I had a better idea for the background. I didn't, but I really like this painting. It reminds me of something. I don't know for sure, but yeah, I like this a lot. Let me know, do you guys create every day? And if so, what do you create? What are you doing every day? And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint Talk episode 156. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.